Fantastic, amazing, brilliant. These are all words that come to mind when you think of Fast and Furious Supercharged, if it was announced to be closing tomorrow. Yes, folks, it should come as no surprise that Fast and Furious Supercharged is indeed one of the most hated modern-day theme park attractions quite literally anywhere. Ever since the ride opened back in 2018, fans have been begging Universal Orlando to hit the undo button and demolish this attraction for years now. However, with the ride now approaching 7 years of age, it's become abundantly clear that Universal has no intentions of doing that. They have no intentions of getting rid of this ride. In fact, it seems that Universal is actually rather content to allow these complaints to fall on deaf ears. So with that in mind, the question of the day is Universal stupid? No, they're not stupid, folks. They're not stupid. In fact, the relationship between Universal and this ride is a lot more complicated than you might think. It's not quite as simple as this ride sucks and nobody likes it, therefore they should get rid of it. In fact, there's a lot more hinging on this attraction than you might expect. And believe it or not, despite the horrendous reputation this ride has, Universal actually kind of loves this ride. I know, insane to think, because quite frankly, this ride is so bad, it's so ugly, that not even a mother could love it. And yet somehow, Universal is still harboring some sort of goodwill towards it? I mean, quite frankly, that's ridiculous to even think, because let's just not forget, this ride is not hated for some arbitrary reason. It's not hated because it's a Fast and Furious attraction, or for some other superfluous reason. It is hated because, quite frankly, unequivocally, undeniably, it's bad. It sucks, okay? It's not a good ride from start to finish. Universal got the green light on this ride basically from the success of Skull Island Reign of Kong over in Islands of Adventure. When that opened in 2016, it did have mixed reviews, but it was largely well received by the general public and consistently got really high wait times straight out the gate. This proves something very important to Universal, the fact that they could take segments from their studio tram tour over in Hollywood and turn them into individual, independent, standalone attractions in Orlando. As Skull Island Reign of Kong was originally King Kong 360 as a part of the studio tram tour. This would ultimately allow Universal to save a whole bunch of money by being able to copy and paste assets from the studio tram tour into new rides for Orlando, instead of having to go back to ground zero and start from scratch, building and developing these attractions from nothing. But in all fairness to Universal, when it came to Skull Island Reign of Kong, they knew that King Kong 360 didn't have enough meat on the bone to support its own attraction, so they added a whole bunch of features to the attraction. Of course, they added a highly detailed and immersive queue. They added the section with the bats, they added the section with the insects, and they added, of course, the giant King Kong animatronic at the end of the ride. These things, alongside a number of other smaller things that they added to the attraction, ultimately allowed Skull Island Reign of Kong to really stand alone as an independent attraction and operate successfully without having to rely on the rest of the studio tram tour to sort of bolster the experience. So, once that proved to be a success, Universal turned to the other screen-based portion of the tram tour, that being Fast and Furious Supercharged, a property that Universal has wanted to get in Universal Orlando for a long time. But when it came to building Fast and Furious Supercharged, Universal, they got bold, they got cocky. They thought that they could simply do no wrong. And they said, you know what, we added all of these bells and whistles to Skull Island Reign of Kong when we brought it over here, but quite frankly, did we need to do that? I think we spent more money than we needed to. Because when you look at Fast and Furious Supercharged, Universal made the grand decision to not add a single thing to the ride. That's right, folks. Universal did not add anything to the ride experience. If you're familiar with the studio tram tour, Fast and Furious Supercharged as a ride experience is the exact same as it is on the studio tram tour. Not a single thing of any sort of significance was added. Yes, there are different videos that play on the truck itself. Yes, there is this, of course, grand set that they created indoors that you pass by in 5 seconds and you don't get to really admire or see anything of. But other than that, the rest of the ride is an exact carbon copy of the experience on the Studio Tram Tour. And I mean, I could believe that this experience as a part of the Studio Tram Tour probably had good reception, right? The general public probably gave it praise because it was a part of a much grander experience. But if you isolate that experience and you put it alone as a standalone attraction, it does not work. It's extremely jarring, it's hard to keep up with what's going on, and it's over before you even know it. Not to mention that it also has some of the worst acting I've ever seen on any piece of media that's been put on screen before in my entire life.
You're under arrest right now.
Also, let me remind you what the name of this attraction is. It's literally called Fast and Furious. Is this ride fast? No, it is not fast. You don't go fast at all. In fact, you're pretty much stopped in place for majority of it. And is it furious in the sense that it's like thrilling or intense? No, it's not thrilling or intense either. So, false advertising, anyone? But to be fair to Fast and Furious Supercharged, there were some good things it did. Of course, the queue is highly detailed. It's massive. There are a ton of hidden Easter eggs in here, more than maybe any queue at any theme park, quite frankly. So clearly, I mean, they went to the King Kong school of theme park queues. Clearly, right? They took that straight out of King Kong's playbook, but for some reason didn't go ahead and actually add a whole bunch of stuff to the ride experience to make it more worthwhile like they did with Kong. Well, the reason for that is because Universal thought that they could add more to the experience in a much cheaper and cost-efficient way. That way being by not adding stuff to the ride itself, but by adding 2 pre-shows to this ride. 2 pre-shows, folks. There are very few rides that have 2 pre-shows. Escape from Gringotts has 2 pre-shows. I mean, Rise of Resistance has 3 pre-shows, right? But you have to really be a monumental experience to warrant more than 1 pre-show. I think it's already like kind of a high bar you have to be to actually even have a pre-show for your experience, quite frankly. And Fast and Furious Supercharged, of all rides, thought that it was worthy of not 1 pre-show, but 2. Ha! Unbelievable. But the funniest part about these pre-shows is that not only are they not really entertaining at all, they're not funny, they're not interesting, they barely give you any information whatsoever, but the funny part is that the information they're trying to divulge in these 2 pre-shows were literally explained in like 15 seconds on the Studio Tram Tour. There's a video that plays right before you go into the tunnel that explains everything you need to know in about 15 seconds. And yet here, for Universal Orlando, they decided, no, the guests at Universal Orlando, they're not as smart as the guests at Universal Hollywood. They need 2 5-minute pre-shows to explain everything that's going on here, because they just wouldn't understand if we gave them that same video clip. No way. No, there's no chance. Are you kidding me? So I have no idea why they decided to add in these 2 pre-shows, though I will say probably the best part of the entire experience when you ride this ride is the pre-shows, because you have 2 live actors in each of these pre-shows who tend to deliver the best comedic or entertaining moments throughout this entire ride experience, because at this point, like, they know the ride sucks. They know people don't like the ride. So they basically just make fun of the ride every single time that you are going through these pre-shows. So at least they make the experience fun. So thank God they're there. So clearly the ride was misjudged as being something that could just be pulled from the Studio Tram Tour and turned into its own attraction when it didn't have enough meat on the bone to warrant that or be capable of supporting that. And the ride was made on the cheap with next to nothing added to the experience to actually build it out and flesh it out for its own individual attraction. And the things that were added were, the most cheapest additions you could possibly add. And though I'm sure you probably don't just think this is just my opinion, just in case you were wondering, yes, indeed, Fast Furious Supercharged has some of the lowest attendance of any ride, not only at Universal Studios Florida or Universal Orlando Resort in general, but also across all the Orlando theme parks. It has some of the lowest attendance of any of those rides. Its wait time hovers around 20 minutes, which, mind you, is including those 2 pre-shows, which means the wait time is more or less walk-on most of the time. You're going to walk right up to that pre-show door, and by the time the next pre-show starts, they're going to let you right in. That's usually how this thing plays out, even on the busiest days. Of course, that's because the ride is not good, and the people who have already experienced it don't want to re-ride it, obviously, but it's also because even new people who have never experienced this ride, who are new to Universal Orlando, they don't want to check it out either because they know the ride has a bad reputation. They've heard it online. They've seen it from their friends and family who have told them since going that this ride sucks. It's not worth your time. And they're thinking, hey, if I got one day at this park, I'm not going to waste my time riding something that's probably not going to be very good. Meaning that the only poor suckers and fools who are riding this thing on a daily basis are people who are completely new to Universal and haven't done any research beforehand whatsoever, or are sadistic. That's just it. So why then, if this is the case, and it's not just a case of opinions, it's not just a case of diehard fans not liking it, but the general public as a whole does not like this attraction, why then does Universal not do anything about it? Why is this attraction still standing? Why have they not gutted this thing from the inside out yet? Well, I alluded to it earlier, folks. Universal loves this thing. Not because they like the ride. They know the ride sucks. Their own creatives will say the ride sucks.
My biggest mistake, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I wish I had stopped our senior management from building the Fast and Furious attraction.
But the reason why they love it is because it is the only representation of one of Universal's top film franchises in the Orlando theme parks. It's the only representation of Fast and Furious. This is a multi-billion-dollar grossing franchise for Universal. It is one of their top performing films at the box office, on home video. No matter what metric you put it up against, it is one of their best performing films on a financial basis, period. And in an era where Universal is trying more than ever to leverage the popularity of their parks to promote their film business, as well as using the success of their films to promote the theme parks, it's more important than ever that Fast and Furious does have a major presence in these Universal parks. So if nothing else, for the simple fact that Fast and Furious is indeed one of Universal's most beloved and popular franchises that they've ever put to screen, is enough reason for Universal to fall on the sword and allow this absolutely abhorrent and hated ride to still exist in their parks 7 years later. And just to clarify, this is not a decision by Universal Parks or Universal Destinations and Experiences. No, this is the decision coming straight from the top at Comcast, who wants that brand synergy, and they want ultimately the studio business to benefit just as much from the theme parks as the theme parks do directly themselves. But here's the thing, Fast and Furious Supercharged is not providing the brand synergy that Comcast was looking for, because the ride is so hated at this point that it's not doing what you want it to do. It's not granting you that great brand synergy that you're hoping for, because the ride is so bad that people are walking off of this attraction not wanting to have anything to do with Fast and Furious for the rest of their lives. Like, literally, they're like, wow, that's what Fast and Furious is? That sucked. I don't want to see any of the movies. I don't want to see any of the new spin-offs that come out of this. I don't want to see anything related to Fast and Furious ever again in my life, because that was horrible. That is literally the reputation that that ride is giving your most lucrative and popular film franchise. So I completely understand why Universal's been stuck between a rock and a hard place, wanting to please fans by getting rid of a ride that they don't like, but also trying to make the right business savvy decision by promoting one of your major films in your park. But as we just laid out, the fact that that promotion is turning sour, the fact that that promotion is actually making people not like that brand, not like that property, not have any interest in the film franchise, I think is starting to show that the scales are starting to tip in favor of this ride going away. As it's not just the bad reputation of this ride that's become a problem, the problem also is that this ride takes up a ton of space. Let's just not forget that Universal took out 2 attractions to put Fast and Furious Supercharged in this spot. They took out Disaster and they took out Beetlejuice Graveyard Review, a 2-for-1 special. And in fact, in doing so, they have since dedicated 2.6 acres to Fast and Furious Supercharged. To give you an idea of just how much space that is quite literally more than half of the entire space that DreamWorks Land takes up. That's crazy. I mean, this space holds so much potential. There's so many different kinds of attractions and big time attractions that Universal could put in this space that it's no longer even just an issue of this space having low attendance because the attraction in there is not attracting a lot of guests. It's also now an opportunity cost because the space and the building that it sits in is so huge, so massive, that you could put in its place some of the most technologically advanced rides we've ever seen in history in that space that could be bringing in guests left and right, and yet you have one of the most hated rides in history taking up the space. So between its bad reputation, the fact that it's actually hurting the popularity of the Fast and Furious brand, and the fact that it takes up a ton of lucrative land, I think that Universal and Comcast have sort of come to the realization that the writing's on the wall, that it's time to get rid of Fast and Furious Supercharged. I do think that knowing that there is going to be an influx of new guests to Universal as a whole after the opening of Epic Universe, they're going to want to hold on for dear life for a little bit longer after that, maybe give it one last hurrah to see if maybe it could turn the tides. But assuming that doesn't happen, which, I mean, let's be honest, that would be a miracle if that did happen. I do think that in the next few years, we will be seeing Fast Furious Supercharged bite the dust. But this still brings up another problem for Universal, as let's just not forget the whole reason why Fast Furious Supercharged was brought to this park in the first place was to have that brand synergy with the studio division and get Fast and Furious promoted as a part of this park. Fast and Furious, yeah, maybe a little less popular than it was when Supercharged first opened in Orlando, but it still is a really popular franchise and it's still one of Universal's most lucrative. So there's no doubt about it that Universal's still going to want Fast and Furious in this park in some way, shape, or form. And of course, the leading rumor for this, at a time where it seems like it might make sense, is saying that Fast and Furious is going to go ahead and replace Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit. As we know, Rip Ride Rockit is closing in September of 2025 and is ultimately looking for new suitors for its plot of land, which, mind you, is a very narrow strip, so we pretty much know it's money in the bank that's going to be a roller coaster taking its place. And with Fast and Furious getting a new roller coaster in Universal Studios Hollywood, that being Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift, the rumors have swirled that they're going to get a very similar version of this attraction in Orlando, in the place that Rip Ride Rockit used to sit. And though this is certainly possible, I tend to believe that Universal is eyeing up something that actually promotes and sells the Fast and Furious brand more than an unthemed outdoor roller coaster likely would. Again, remember, the whole point of putting Fast and Furious in this park is to sell the brand, is to sell the movies, is to sell the merchandise. An outdoor roller coaster that has a light Fast and Furious theme is ultimately not really going to do that for Universal. So I really do think that Universal may be looking at other options here. And in fact, maybe they aren't looking to replace Rip Ride Rockit with Fast and Furious. With the idea being that instead, Fast and Furious will get a much more prominent presence in Universal Studios Florida. My idea being that it goes where Fear Factor Live and Men in Black Alien Attack are, instead creating a brand new land there. As let's be honest, folks, neither of these attractions are long for this world, as of course Fear Factor Live has been closed for years already now, and the building's just sitting there abandoned, only resuscitated once a year for Halloween Horror Nights. And then, of course, Men in Black is a ride that's over 20 years old. It's a property that's owned by their competitors, Sony, and they have to pay licensing fees to them to have the ride in their park. And it's obviously not even a property that moves merchandise, because they don't even really sell Men in Black merchandise in the shop anymore. They just sell random stuff in the gift shop now. Clearly, this ride is not long for this world whatsoever. So given the fact that these attractions just so happen to be located right next to each other, it makes for a perfect opportunity to put a new land in its place. And no, before you say anything, I'm not proposing a Fast and Furious land. That is stupid and dumb. Instead, I'm proposing a Tokyo land in Universal Studios Florida. After all, if you look at the lands of Universal Studios Florida, many of them are themed to major cities: Hollywood, New York, London. What better one to throw among the bunch than Tokyo? As not only would Tokyo bring about a whole new type of theming and infrastructure to this park that would make it really stand out as a land, but also, if we're talking about The Simpsons being replaced by Pokemon in the future, what better transition to have than going from Tokyo to Pokemon and vice versa? It is a perfect transition versus what is there currently. But beyond that, I do think this actually would be the perfect setting for a Fast and Furious attraction, with the idea being that the central attraction, the e-ticket of the land, would be a Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift ride. which I know seems a little bit silly to suggest given the fact that Tokyo Drift was the worst performing film in the franchise at the box office in its entire history. So a little silly to propose that, but I do think that Tokyo Drift has been seen enough at this point to where it can be warranted to sort of be the basis and the setting of this attraction, as you have to consider that Tokyo Drift, of any of the movies in the franchise, might be one of the best at embodying what the series is really about, which is about racing cars, right? And driving them fast and furiously, right? Yeah. So what better attraction to make for a Fast and Furious ride than to go ahead and make a giant slot car attraction like Test Track or Radiator Springs over in California Adventure. Make Universal's version of that. Make it fast, make it furious, and involve some racing in the bunch, and also add in a drifting element. After all, this is in Tokyo. We gotta have the Tokyo Drift as a part of the ride. Not only would an attraction like this truly embody what a Fast and Furious experience should be, but it would do a great job of actually promoting the franchise and not only showing people what the franchise is about, where it's located, who the characters are, what the storylines are like, but it would actually do a good job of, getting people excited about it to actually go ahead and check out the franchise and the films that this ride is based on. With the pièce de résistance being the giant hill from Tokyo Drift, having that be the major outdoor set piece and landmark for this ride would be stunning. It would be absolutely stunning. Imagine where Men in Black Alien Attack sits right now. Replace that building basically the same height with this hill, with cars driving down the side of it, with actual guests in it racing each other. What an amazing set piece that would be. What an amazing iconic landmark that could be seen from several different points in the park. I'm sorry, you can't convince me that's not a genius idea. Universal, take that one for free. But let me also say that if Universal really wanted to go all in Fast and Furious, and for whatever reason they said, you know what, one ride is not enough, or maybe we don't want to put all of our eggs in one ride basket. Of course, we did that with Supercharged and it blew up in our face. Let's get a backup plan in. Well, hey, you got Fear Factor Live sitting empty and abandoned in this space as well. Why not go ahead and turn that into a Lights, Motors, Action-esque Fast and Furious stunt show, right? That, again, would embody exactly what Fast and Furious is about, really sell the brand while also creating a really unique and fun and special stunt show, which, yes, Universal does have Bourne, and Bourne is really cool, but Bourne does not really take great advantage of vehicles or of grand sets. And that's something that Universal has done really well with in the past with Waterworld, and I don't think Universal Orlando really has their own version of Waterworld, and I think that something like Lights, Motor, Action in this park as a Fast and Furious stunt show would go a long way in delivering that really special sort of massive in scale stunt show that this park is really missing. Also, a problem you might have been denoting with this plan is that if you go ahead and you get rid of Fear Factor Live, well, now you no longer have a stage to use for Halloween Horror Nights. Well, hey, if they went ahead and replaced Fear Factor Live with another show, you would still have the stage in the theater available for Halloween Horror Nights. So another plus in the direction of a stunt show. But folks, let's not get too carried away here, because let's not forget that the space between Fear Factor Live and Men in Black is about 8 acres in space. That is nothing to sneeze at. That's about the same space as the Lost Continent. You could fit like 4 Fast and Furious Supercharged into this space. It's a lot of land, undeniably. So does it really make sense to have 2 Fast and Furious attractions here? Probably not. I think just having the one Tokyo Drift attraction is probably okay. If you needed a little more land for that, you could probably go into the backstage areas here in the top right corner of the park. After all, a lot of these backstage areas are being moved over to Epic Universe, if not have already been moved over anyway, so that land very well may be up for grabs. And the area that I have carved out here, that over 2 acres plot of land, that does not include the Halloween Horror Nights tents that I know people are like, you can't touch those, you can't move those. So hey, we're not even saying getting rid of those. Go ahead and put it into this plot of land here that may very well be up for grabs. Now, you don't have to expand into there, but I think if you did, it would open this land up a lot more to have it, have more depth. Obviously, right now, when you think about the space between Fear Factor Live and Men in Black Alien Attack, it's just the one path, right? There's no depth to that area, right? You can't walk into it. Whereas if you expanded this land to fit in that extra 2 acres, you could probably have a section of this where you get to walk back into the land. Maybe you could put a restaurant in there, right? Japanese restaurant, or some shops or something else into that area that really sort of fleshes out the land and makes more use of the space. But as far as what else could be here, if we're not going to go ahead and build a second Fast and Furious attraction, what about Godzilla? All right, there's been a lot of talk about Godzilla, right? I mean, after all, his good old buddy, his partner in crime, is sitting over in the other park in King Kong, right? He's been waiting for Godzilla to come join him for decades now. Why doesn't he join the party? Well, Godzilla, of course, is not public domain like King Kong is, so Universal cannot use them for free. They have to go through Toho, who is a Japanese movie studio. Now, we talked about how Universal is big on brand synergy right now, so they don't really want to use third-party properties if they can help it. But Godzilla might be kind of an exception because Toho is not really a direct competitor of Universal. Yeah, sure, maybe in the Japanese market they are, but by and large, how about the worldwide box office? Toho and Universal do not really ever compete with each other directly. So Toho is a small enough competitor in the market where maybe Universal's okay with paying them for the theme park rights, especially in those theme park rights probably wouldn't be too terribly expensive. And you might be saying, how do you build a Godzilla attraction in the small space that Fear Factor Live takes up? Well, I'm thinking you don't build outward, you don't build on the ground, you build up into the sky, folks. And I'm thinking that Universal uses this opportunity to build their own sort of Tower of Terror, a ride that's themed to a Japanese skyscraper, and basically you come in, there's a pre-show that basically says, hey, we're gonna give you a tour of this brand new skyscraper, only for Godzilla to start attacking the city. You hop into the elevator to try and get high ground for some reason. I didn't say it had to make perfect sense, but hey, you hop in an elevator because you gotta go ahead and get to high ground to escape Godzilla, only for Godzilla to start attacking the skyscraper while you're in the elevator. Boom, it's genius, it writes itself. Take it, Universal, please, run with it. And let me just clarify that though, of course, most of this would be executed using screens, I do think there is enough space here where you could have a section at the end of this ride that features a full-scale, neck-up Godzilla animatronic that would really hit home, take a play right out of King Kong's playbook, and end this ride on a high note. And you know what? If you're not interested in that, again, we are dealing with Tokyo here. Another possibility is to run with an anime property or run with a bunch of anime properties and put some sort of attraction theme to anime in this spot. I literally get comments on almost every single video I post for like the last 5 years of people saying Universal should add anime to this park. And I always kind of think to myself, like, that's just never going to happen because where would they put an anime property in this park where it would make sense? Hey, if they built a Tokyo Land, that's a perfect opportunity to get anime in here. And we know there are a lot of anime fans here in the United States, so perhaps that could be an audience that Universal could really sort of tap into should they want to. And a lot of those properties, they already have the rights to for theme parks through Universal Studios Japan, which tends to use those properties quite a lot. So, hey, it's an idea. But even if you didn't want to use any of those properties, there still are plenty of other ones that maybe even Universal owns themselves that could easily enough take place in Japan, or maybe already do take place in Japan, making it an ideal setting to go ahead and build in this park. But regardless of what my ideas are for Fast and Furious, the question still remains, what is the future of Fast and Furious in this park going to look like? Is it supercharged? Is it a new ride? Is it a new land? These are all questions we're waiting to have answered. But one thing that I think I might know the answer to is what's going to happen with that juicy building that Fast and Furious Supercharged currently occupies. Click the video in mirror screen right now to see my proposal for Harry Potter to take over the space. And with that being said, I'll see y'all next time. Peace.